I think it's been a day full of WordPress wars and SEO scenarios. Well, I'm here to tell you none of that. I'm here to tell you a story. And the story is about me. And I grew up collecting different kinds of tea. So friends and family who would travel well would bring back teas to me from wherever they traveled. So at one point in time, I had teas from China, Japan, Kenya, South Africa, Russia, and of course India, and several other places. And I stored them in my father's old trunk. And this was a very, very dear treasure to me. And well, I just went about life, worked as a communication and media professional for about 10 years, until I discovered that old trunk hidden away somewhere. And I realized that I own some of the fascinating, most rare, exotic teas of the world, but I know very, very little about them. So in 2011, I flew to Sri Lanka to study tea. And yes, there's an education in tea, just like there's an education in wine. And I grew up, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, went down to the tea gardens, plucked tea leaves with the women, came back to the factory, saw how that tea leaf is processed, and in the evening had the privilege of sipping that fresh cup of tea that I plucked that morning. It was a beautiful experience. It changed everything that I knew about tea. And I returned back to India, and my motivation was to share everything that I had just discovered about tea. And we hosted a lot of tea tastings, tea appreciation sessions around the city. And soon enough, I started profiling each of the teas that I owned on my blog. So Tea Trunk, which is on WordPress, teatrunk.com, I started posting about each single kind of tea that I had. And soon enough, I discovered that there's an increasing audience for people who realize that tea is not just chai. There's a world of tea. So did you know there's apart from black tea and green tea, there's white tea, there's blue tea, there's red tea, there's purple, and there's even yellow. There's so many different kinds of tea. So I've seen just the last few sessions, there are not many questions from the audience. So I have taken it upon myself to ask you a couple. Okay, fair enough. So the question is, we all know green tea and black tea are different. So do you think green tea and black tea come from the same plant, or they're different plants? Like, what is your perception of it? How does it work? So how many of you think green tea and black tea all come from the same plant? Alright, and how many of them say that no, green tea and black tea taste completely different, they are from different plants? Of course, they taste very, very different. Oh well, quite a few. And the rest don't have any opinion? Well, did you know that black tea and green tea come from the same plant, the Camellia sinensis? In fact, any different kind of tea, like whether it's white, blue, or all the colors that I mentioned, come from the same plant. And there's so many more fascinating facts about tea that you'll discover. Well, that kind of my blog. In fact, I think Anshul mentioned it earlier today that when you're blogging, you should think like an entrepreneur. And I realized that a lot of people who are, especially food bloggers or fashion bloggers, because they're the most in the limelight, get condemned for making money out of their blog, or for being, oh, they've suddenly turned commercial. But I feel that there's a lot that you see yourself growing from a blogger into an entrepreneur, and it should be a natural progression. And that's something that happened to me as well. I turned from a part-time blogger at Tea Trunk to being a full-time entrepreneur. And in 2013, we launched our own line of teas. We work with small farmers across Assam, Darjeeling, Nilgiris. We source the teas directly from them and craft them into fun tea blends. So we've got a chili chai on our website. We've got a Long Island tea, non-alcoholic, and a whole lot of fun flavors there. Well, while I arrived starting Tea Trunk, which of course was a tribute to my trunk of tea, where my love of tea began, my little treasure of tea collection, I ran Story Ninja. And Story Ninja was about, well, it's time for me to change that slide. Yeah. So I ran Story Ninja, which was a boutique consultancy for content marketing. And being a media professional, I found, especially being in the last 5 years, faced this question that, oh, we want to be on Facebook, we want to be on Twitter, we want to set up a page. But my question to them would be that that's fantastic, that's where you want to be. But what are you going to say? Like, what do you want to talk about on your Facebook page? What are the kind of pictures you want to share on your Twitter feed? And the answer would be always an afterthought. And that's always been very disturbing to me, that why is content always an afterthought rather than it being the showcase? And that's also something that Sunil touched upon, is content being, the key and everything else being complementary to it. So at Story Ninja, we work with brands and entrepreneurs to help them, find content marketing and narrative tools. So today I'm going to talk about and share some of the storytelling tools that I have found handy in my journey, both at Story Ninja and TeachRank. Well, I don't know how legible it is to some of you, but what does that look like? Alive? Anybody alive there? Harry Potter. What else? Do all of Star Wars? What can you see from this side? What do you see? Sorry? Harry Potter, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Star Wars. Sorry? Alright. So, what you actually see is a pattern. And that's exactly what storytelling is about. Understanding the pattern and breaking it. That's exactly what story is about. And I'm going to show you how simple that is and how some of these tools can be useful for you to leverage the content on your blog. Oh, I got to do this. So Story Ninja is my little fellow here who's a master storyteller and a killer of information overload. And this is his story. And he's joined by, alright, am I doing this very fast? Okay. He's joined by Social Robot, and he's a robot, of course, but he has a sea of questions, which I hope some of you have as well. And what do you see here? Guys, yes? Unless some of you are daydreaming, what's that? Lots of zeros. I know some of the coders here will see differently, but that's just a lot of zeros. And can I have the next slide? What do you see now? Well, excellent. That's just one. And that's exactly what storytelling is about. It's as simple as that. It's about defining a pattern and breaking it. When you see a row of zero, it means nothing to you. But when you spot that one, it has a piece of information, it has something to say. And that's what we're going to explore today. Building a pattern and gradually breaking it, that in a sense is the true pattern of a story. But why learn about this pattern? Like why would it be so important? Why does Harry Potter seamlessly translate into Star Wars and seamlessly translate into a story that could be on your blog? How does that take place? So I think this is something that's always stuck with me, which what Nassim Nicholas Taleb said, that ideas come and go, but stories stay. And I have a really important question to ask everyone. Do you know this Vodafone have these funny characters who like Bobby characters? What are they called? Excellent. Now, do you know the brand Airtel? And they have a logo which is like this A thing. What's that logo called? Well, what's that logo called? That logo is called a wave. And Airtel spent a 2 crore ad campaign. If some of you remember that you get to name the logo, and the name that gets selected gets to win and travel to US, and they gave out iPhones, they gave out iPads, they gave you everything that you needed. And I'm talking to a room full of people that don't even remember what that was. And that's exactly my point. Great ideas come and go. I mean, Airtel had a wonderful idea. The crowdsourcing was the theme of the day, the flavor of the day, and they decided to crowdsource the name of their logo. That idea was one singular idea, as compared to Vodafone's series of Zuzus. You all remember Zuzus with in a blink of what that was. And that's something that is really important for you to take back to your blogs. Having one fantastic, very well-read, high-ranked blog post is excellent, but carrying that post into a series, how can you make a story out of it? How can you weave it into engaging your audience? How can you use that as a hook to keep your audience engaged for longer? That is the role of a story, a good story. Can I have the next slide? So, this is something I personally believe in, that tell people a story that they can identify with as their own, and the need to persuade, convince, or sell them anything disappears. I think, especially since I run a product business, I increasingly find that there's so many tea brands out there, there's so many fun teas available, but a lot of people just remember tea trunk only because it was something that I grew up with. They connected to my childhood story, and that's something that I personally find really amusing, that in spite of all the goodness that I talk about on my product brochures, that it's 100% natural tea, it will do this to you, that to you, what most people remember about tea trunk is my childhood story. So I think having a story, a backstory to your blog, or saying something that adds your personal touch, makes it very, very human, and that's what people connect with. People don't connect with their computer screen. They connect with not the words, they connect with the person behind it, and it's your responsibility to show them who that person is. Apart from putting up pretty pictures, is there something more you can do? So, can I have the next slide, please? Alright, so, Robot is not convinced. He says, I like what I'm listening, but how can I put all of this into action? And Story Ninja wants to take him on a journey. And this is the hero's journey. How many of you have seen this before? Anybody? Alright, so this is the monomyth. And this actually is the reason why the first slide is Harry Potter and George Lucas, Star Wars seamlessly. This is called the monomyth, and it says that any story written in the past, present, or future is based on a certain pattern. And how wonderful could it be if all of us could gain from learning about this pattern? And that's exactly what the hero's journey is about. In this little time constraint, I'm going to do my best at taking you through this, but it's actually a very in-depth pattern which I will highly recommend you go back and study on your own. But what it divides is between the known and the unknown. And this is for all the ladies, this is not a gender bias. The hero is not necessarily a hero, it's just the protagonist. And it could be anybody. And it always starts with a call to adventure. A very common example to that would be like Buddha. He had no reason to leave home, it was just a calling. And that call to adventure is usually a cause for a story to begin. There's a supernatural aid, which is usually circumstances, how do you feel about when you bump into a friend, into a long lost friend, into an elevator at a mall? It's just supernatural aid. You pass over the threshold, starting new beginnings, there's several challenges and temptations, and there's a certain revelation. Each story, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Star Wars, whether Lord of the Rings, and I'm picking all the classics, but even if not, then if you pick up some of the really popular Bollywood movies, there's always a certain pattern to it. And there's always this transformation, revelation, and a journey of return. Now, it sounds really simple, but what really makes one story different from the other is the characters and the story plots. And there's this monomyth is based on Joseph Campbell's The Power of Heroes, and he further describes 13 master characters and story plots which lend more body to this monomyth. Can I move on to the next slide, please? Alright, so I'm going to play that game that we played in the morning. Pick a number from 1 to 7, and I'm going to see what I can, I have a mental note of what I'm gifting you. Well, so who wants to pick a number? Suddenly everybody is alive. See, very well done. So, alright, how about you? Yeah. 9. Well done. Let's see what 9 is. Can we move on to the next slide? So, I'll come back to you with your prize when we reach number 9. But what we're looking at are the 7 basic story plots. And this is something that I really feel each one of you can benefit from on your blog. You know, a lot of times when, when you're looking at your blank screen or when you're blank, piece of paper, you don't know where to start. But having certain plots in mind or having the monomyth as a template or a guideline to start with makes things a lot more easier. And I've personally experienced that, and you'll see that on my blog too. Starting and picking up stories from the plots makes it much easier. Can we have the first one, please? Okay. So these are all 7 plots, which I'm not sure how much in detail I can go to, but that's a basic plot, a certain business example or what are the main calling stages. So overcoming the monster, an all-powerful monster and whom the hero must confront in a fight to death. So that's one classic thing. So for an example, how it could apply to some of your blog posts is talking about a personal challenge or talking about, even something that held you back on a certain, does somebody have any thoughts popping in their head about a certain blog post that they've done where they had to speak about a certain challenge that they had overcome? Anybody? Yeah, please go ahead, love to know.
Studying engineering, so there was a time when I did not know whether I'll clear the exams or not. So I blogged about it.
Alright. So not sure whether you're going to overcome the monster or not. I feel, talking about drawing it from story plots like these makes it more human, makes it possible for other people to connect with you even more. I read a lot of tea blogs, and I read a lot about the technicalities of teas, the terroir it came from, the flavor profile and all of that. And I realized that there's a lot of information, but what most people remember is when I write or when somebody writes about how I was stuck on the 67th cup of tea trying to describe its flavor when my Japanese tea master gave me a test to try out 100 different teas and try and profile them. And that blog post was, I think, one of my most popular blog posts there, because it was about something really personal that I faced, and it made people easier to connect with. Can we move on to the next one? Alright, the quest, of course, the example being Lord of the Rings, where you start a journey, and you'll see most blog posts that, or most content that describe a journey do really well, and that you see across movies, across videos. And I'm speaking of journeys as in, for example, Life of Pi. It's a journey, and that journey is captivating. It starts from one end to the other. And if you can do something, even if you're not a travel blogger, sharing a journey and putting that into perspective would be a good thing for you. Can we move on to the next one, please? Alright, Voyage and Return. Of course, the Wizard of Oz, moving to a fascinating land and coming back, having a good start but having doubts and coming back to another region. And if we look at the third column, there are main stages: falling into another world, initial fascination, frustration, nightmare, thrilling, escape. So these main stages, I don't want to look at this as a template. That would be a really awful way to look at that. Think of these as guidelines. Think of this that, if you really want to talk about a really fascinating experience that you had, how can you break it down into these 5 or 6 stages and consciously try and do that, and then see the structure of your story would definitely increase the readability of it. Can we move to the next one? Comedy, of course, the most popular form, and we saw that with Unreal Times and a couple of others. Sorry, can we go back? And especially, I feel right now the flavor of the season is comedy. They look at the number of comedy shows, the comedy blogs, video blogs, and if there's a certain element of lightheartedness that you could bring to your blog, I definitely see it being well traveled across the internet. Can we move to the next one? Alright, tragedy. You know, it's a really, really tough one to talk about, but I feel, especially with content, I mean, it's definitely your call, but you need to take a call on how much of yourself can you put out there in terms of your personal stories that you'd like to share. Again, there's a certain pattern that even tragedy follows of anticipation, dream, frustration, nightmare, and then a final destruction. So again, weaving your story around these 5 stages will make it much more easier for you. Can we move to the next one? Cinderella, my favorite story. Of course, a rags to riches, and that's, I think, the story that most people like to hear, which has a happy ending. But of course, I always like to say that there's no story, there's no hero without a villain. You know, and even when we work on our story projects, we try and actually not work on the protagonist. We spend a lot of time working on the villain. We work on who the evil person is, because the more the evil is highlighted, the grander your hero is going to be. So keep that in mind when you want something to shine out there in your story. Don't work on it. Just let him be. Work on the evil, work on what the frustrations are, work on the obstacles, work on the challenges, and your story will shine by itself. And that's something that's bound to happen. Can we move to the next one? Sleeping Beauty. Again, a story of rebirth, transformation. You know, hero or heroine falls under a dark spell and eventually traps them into some wintry stage. And there's a recovery after a long period. And stories of redemption again highlight a certain vulnerability. And I was recently watching this talk on how being vulnerable is a strength. And that's pretty, I mean, that's a conflict, but a very interesting thought to put out there. And especially for some of you who blog about personal experiences, you know, sharing your human vulnerability by sharing your transformation stories would definitely work out here. Can we move to the next one? So we've gone through these 7 rounds, and the girl who won number 9, can I know your name please? Nisha. Disha. There was no number 9. There was just 7. There was just 7 story plots. But I'm going to gift you one of our tea trunk teas. So please meet me after that. Thank you, Disha. So since Disha won herself with just now a box of tea, I have one more quiz and one more box of tea for grabs. We just went through the 7 story plots, right? How many of you can identify what this advertisement is? There's no, just say it out loud and answer the question. Fair and Lovely, absolutely. So Fair and Lovely, according to the 7 story plots that we just saw, which plot would it fall under? Yeah, so what's the story plot? Rags to riches, rebirth, what else? Transformation, comedy, and tragedy for some. Who said rebirth out here? Well, it is the story of rebirth, and if you see advertisements, and that's the best way for you to do your self-study on story patterns, is try and look at advertisements and identify what this pattern is. For example, and actually you can try and relate them so much to fairy tales or folk stories that you've grown up listening. How many of you watched that advertisement of Axe where this guy is just taking all the women of this town all away? You've seen that, right? And what story does that remind you? Exactly. You know, so a lot of stories are universal and they are based on certain patterns, and the more and more you try and decode them, you will see they will all come down to one pattern. And that's all that I'm talking about, is understand the patterns of storytelling, and that will help you say your story better. Can we have the next slide, please? So here's my little roundup on just everything that I had to share, is identify the conflict and anomaly, which is what I said, that find that number 1. And I think the best way to do it is go and study your competition. I mean, not really competition of peers. Go and read as many blogs as you find and find out what they're not doing. Find out where, see all the zeros, put them down and find where is that one where you can plug that in. I think going where your competition is not going is a wonderful place to start telling a story. To find that anomaly, find that evil, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, a social evil. It could just be something as a challenge or as a certain obstacle. It could be as simple as that, but work on that, make that evil. Second, pick your basic story plot. So what would you like what should you like people to remember in your blog among the 7 story plots? Would you like people to remember that your blog is a blog about transformation and rebirth? Would you like them to remember that it's about like a rags to riches story? Because these are the stories that they will connect with the most. So find out what you want your tone to be. And take in lots of ideas and inspiration, and you're on your way to becoming a story ninja. Can you have the next slide? Alright, these are some more tools that I'm quickly going to run through, and these are some that I've talked about. Be human, try and add more human content. Work with your community. Collaboration takes you a long way. Start story trails, like the whole Vodafone versus Airtel is such a hard-hitting example of what a story series can do to you. Make it a quest, make it a journey, make it interesting that some people join you on this journey. Co-create, collaborate, find out who's doing something of your interest, even if it's not related to your field. Try and look at the parallel. Same things with visuals. Video blogging is something that I'm personally putting my money on, and a lot of you should look at how you could incorporate videos in your blog. Piece it all together. Please don't just take in a lot of ideas and make a collage. Just try and weave things more beautifully, and that's when you have a wonderful story to tell. And again, I'm going to repeat something that I said earlier. Ideas come and go, but story stays. And I hope my story stays with you for today. Thank you so much.